Hey, everybody, welcome back to Dental Unfiltered. I'm Matt Brown. I'm here with my normal co-host, Dr. Andrew Vallo. We have a pretty unique, exciting episode for you today. It's titled "Is Dr. Vallo Dumb?" And I'll kind of preface this, guys. Let me tell you what: if you're hanging out in these Facebook groups and you're in these different forums on the internet to talk about dentistry, and you have very conflicting views, and people have a lot of advice to offer and a lot of points of view. And there's always in dental, there's always a underlying culture of scarcity mindset a little bit. I think there's really two camps that kind of exist in dental, and unfortunately, I think one is the 80% and one's the 20%, or one's the 90%, one's the 10%. I think scarcity mindset and like run your practice lean and don't overspend is very much a prevailing statement. What I will tell you is the other camp is like invest in it, invest in it, invest in it, grow it, be aggressive, have an abundance mindset. We interview a lot of successful docs in the show, and I have a ton of successful docs that work for me. My average practice does like 2.75 million in production a year. And I'll tell you this, my super docs that have these super practices that do the $400,000 plus numbers, none of them, not one of them, has a scarcity mindset. Not one. They're all on the
You're
abundance
you're
mindset
talking
train
400,000 plus per month,
per month.
just for
Yeah, even
context out
even my
there.
even my yeah even my $250,000 per month plus practices. You don't have scarcity mindset guys. Like I got you, Dr. Vallo. I got another doc who's kind of private about his numbers. He does $710,000 a month, and he's in a bad neighborhood, by the way, real bad neighborhood. And they're all abundance mindset. Like every one of you guys is spending 10,000 plus a month on marketing. So the point of this episode we're going to do with Dr. Vallo Dumb is you get in these Facebook groups, these people all offering advice, and I would watch you take advice from, first of all, because have they done it, and do what they did actually align with what you want to do, right? So if you're like, I want to build a super practice, and like this guy that's a 20-year veteran of the industry over here is like, no, you want to spend 2% of your collections on marketing. Well, he may have only ever had $120,000 practice that he sold when he was 50. Like he might not have your aligned stuff with what it's aligned for you. So Dr. Vallo, this was your idea to do this episode. Are you dumb? The question is are you overspending for marketing? Are you too abundance mindset? And could you get a little bit more out of it if you spent less and saved some money? Are you dumb?
Yeah, guys, this will be another one of those spicy episodes. This is called Dental Unfiltered for a reason. As our listeners are probably well aware at this point, I'm not afraid to speak my mind. I'm not afraid to talk about situations and altercations. I'll be honest. I know I'm at the far end of the spectrum when it comes to abundance mindset. I know I'm at the far end of the spectrum when it comes to, my willingness to take risk and to invest and to grow aggressively. And I understand there's different ways to do things. So, my take here, guys, is that I don't sit here and try to tell you like this is the law, this is the only way to do things. I think we've had episodes where we've talked about like, hey, obviously my way of doing things, my way of growing a group aggressively, multi-practice group, getting out of the chair clinically, like this is not for everyone, and that's totally fine. There are many ways to be successful as a dentist, both as an associate and as a practice owner. At the same time, though, guys, I don't like it when other dentists or kind of self-proclaimed gurus will go out there and basically tell you something like it's a blanketed statement, like this is the way that you have to do things. And so that's where I get a little bit fired up. And this episode, specifically is in relation to a Facebook post. Somebody had asked about marketing budgets for startups and how to grow startups. I don't honestly remember the exact question, but as I often do in these Facebook groups, I had chimed in and I just basically told them what I do. I said, hey, I've, for my startups, I typically budget and spend around $15,000 per month, with the goal of seeing between 125 and 175 new patients right out the bat. And this is kind of how I do it. And I try to invest mostly in Facebook and Google marketing and Instagram, social media. We try to avoid mailers. So I kind of gave my feedback on the question. And another dentist, who's kind of well known for lean and mean practices and, a little bit more scarcity, trying to minimize overhead, do it yourself, avoid vendors at all costs, that type of a thing, responded to my comment and essentially said, he kind of gave a numbered response. And so, number one was spending $15,000 a month on marketing is just plain dumb. So
That's such a stupid statement itself.
number two, you're just lining the pockets of the marketing companies as if I was spending a percentage of my ad spend. So like, here's a guy who doesn't know anything about me or my group really. But he's chiming in with these blanketed statements about how stupid it is and how he spends only $500 a month on marketing and sees all these new patients and how you guys
Yeah,
can
but if he
do
spent
it
no money a
too.
month, that might just be natural patient flow in his market.
Right,
That's not
right.
from marketing. Who cares?
Yeah. So anyways, guys, some of you guys probably know who this dentist
What if
is.
natural
He's
patient flow for the other patient isn't there? Like, what if the other practice that's asking for advice doesn't have your natural patient flow because of your geography? Then what do you tell that
right.
individual? Tell them to pay
Well,
$500 a month
right.
for marketing? Like how stupid is that statement?
So, and we'll get to my response here in a second. But so this is Dr. D'Angelo Webster. He does the practice biopsy. He's all about lean and mean. He does coaching on it. He did his startup, I believe, around the same time I opened my first practice. And he, like me, I will give him credit. He's very transparent with his numbers. He posts his production reports. He posts his P&Ls. He does boast a very low overhead percentage. I think he's often in the maybe upper 30% overhead, which is great. He's talking about trying to keep as much profit from your practice as possible. And which I think is a good thing. I do focus on our overhead numbers. I focus on our profitability, on our EBITDA, despite the growth of my group. But at the same time, he has grown a small startup. And I think, with his current numbers, he's tracking in, maybe a little bit over $1 million for the year or something like that. And so again, the part that frustrates me isn't that that's not a viable thing to do. I mean, for docs that don't want to take on risks, they don't want to grow a big practice, they maybe don't want to have multi, doctor location groups, they don't want to have multi locations, they just want to have a nice, simple, profitable practice. There is nothing wrong with that, and I would never tell him that there was. I would never make a comment like that. But to respond to my comment, to say what I'm doing is dumb without even knowing, what I've accomplished with the growth of my group, and to basically tell those out there that look to him for advice as the expert on the subject, all you need to spend is $500 a month on marketing. That is a dangerous statement. So like that fresh, more than saying that what I'm doing is dumb with my marketing budget, telling other doctors who maybe haven't done a startup before or looking for advice for their startups, telling them that spending $500 a month will get them plenty of new patients, that is a dangerous statement, and that's going to lead to many startup docs failing. So, my response, to his comment, and he had made a couple other bullet points. I honestly, those were the biggest ones. I don't remember what the last couple were, but basically my response was, okay, yes, I'm dumb. I've grown a group from 0 to soon to be 10 offices in about 4 years. I've grown a group from 0 revenue to we're now tracking and projected for about $15 million in 2025. But yes, it is very dumb that I invest so much money in marketing for my practices. What was I thinking? I did mention, obviously, I'm in a more competitive area and markets in Tampa and Southeast Florida, Miami. And he is in a more rural, less competitive area. He also invests heavily in ground marketing and is very involved in the community, and that's great. So again, to the point, can you get new patients without spending a whole lot on marketing? Yeah, you can. Some of it depends on how much work and effort you're willing to put in with the ground marketing. Some of it depends on the demographics, the area that you're in. But at the end of the day, while he does have a successful, profitable practice, if he had more of an abundance mindset like I did, or like I do, his practice would probably be doing a lot more than $1 million a year. So, I think, and I challenged him in my response. I said, I challenge you to think bigger, my friend. Again, at the end of the day, that scarcity mindset is what is holding most of us dentists and most people in general, most entrepreneurs back. You've got to, if you're going to be a business owner, especially a startup business, you've got to have the mentality of, if I build it, they will come. If I invest in my practice, if I invest in marketing, if I invest in my team, it is going to allow me to grow. if you have that scarcity mindset and you believe that every vendor is out to get you, oh, every marketing company is just trying to line their pockets, you should do marketing yourself. Every CPA firm is trying to line their pockets, you should do your own books. You know, so like that mentality is what kills me. And again, to each their own. You know, I'm sure he's happy with the practice that he has, and that's totally fine. But what irks me, what frustrates me, again, isn't just the fact that he told me what I'm doing. Honestly, I don't care, guys. People can think I'm dumb. People can think I'm crazy. People can think I'm a ridiculous risk taker, and you know, to some extent, I probably am. I have taken some pretty big risks to grow the group the way that I have. That's fine. But like to sit out there and be the self-proclaimed, you know, startup guru and tell other dentists that you can grow your practice successfully on $500 a month marketing budget is just dangerous. Because if you're in a competitive market like I am and you want to grow that practice and you're not spending any money on marketing, you're going to have to be hustling and grinding 24/7 out in the community at every single event, successfully booking patients if you really want to grow that practice. So again, what works in one area for him is probably not going to work nearly as well in the more competitive markets. So
First of all, no one who's wildly successful or does anything groundbreaking, people don't ever think that you're not crazy when you're doing it. Like, I mean, my whole background's close violence and special ops and Brazilian jiu-jitsu and stuff. I started a dental company, and my whole family was like, "You crazy?" And I'm like, "I don't know, I'm figure it out, right?" So there's a point of like if the herd 90% of the herd's going that way and you're going this way, you might have figured something out. Now you might not have, but you probably did, right? So the other point of view on this is, you know, you have to consider the lens the individual's looking through that is giving you the advice, right? So the individual with a pretty good practice, rural, $100,000 a month practice, whatever you said the numbers were, and you know we look at it at our company from a big data point of view, right? So we're looking at from the point of view of like DIs are one of our largest partners. We share a lot of data with them. They have 11,000 practices worth of data. Energize, I think the other day I was asking my team this. I can't remember the numbers, but I think we manage like 2.5 to $3 million a month in ad spend. So I have like all this data from every lead generated. I know we booked 15,000 dental appointments last month for our clients. So I see the ROI on it. And on one side, it's okay, save every dollar. On the other side, I think it's like the average ROI on Energize right now is like 500 to 600% return on investment or something like that. So like on one side, it's like, hey, save all the money. On the other side, it's like, what is the lost opportunity cost of not investing the money if you're in the right market? Like you're looking at this from such a small lens. Like I look at it from a very large lens that's very fisheye because I see all this data and I see all these results across all these practices. And what I'll tell you for sure is like, I mean, we have a really high retention rate for a marketing agency. Like we don't have a lot of cancellations respectively to the size of our accounts, and our accounts have a long age. You know, DI does a study on us on how successful our accounts are, and I'll tell you that our metrics beat the top 10% of every single metric on DI for measuring performance of growth. And we encourage our clients to heavily invest in marketing. Like if you came on for two products with us, let's say it was Google AdWords and Meta, we would or Facebook, whatever they're calling it now, we would encourage you to spend 4,000 on each and to start there, and then we'll figure out what your budget should be in your market, then go up and down. Any marketer that tells you from the beginning like your budget should be X before they ever turn anything on, they say, "Oh, that'll be fine." You should wonder a little bit. But I think in this scenario, someone's looking through such a small lens of their own experience in a rural market with a small practice that's very hard to apply that thinking blanketly to all practices. Does that make sense?
yeah, well, you know, it's not a one size fits all, and you know, we just talked about this in our listener question episode, which I don't know which order everything's gonna be released in, but if it hasn't come out yet, basically, you know, what we talked about was that the question, what is an appropriate marketing budget, you know, there's not really a correct answer to that. So the answer depends on how quickly do you want to grow your practice. So the faster you want to grow, and you know, especially if you're a startup, you're going to want to spend more money on marketing. If you don't mind growing slower, or if you are a more established practice, or if you're in a super rural area where you don't have to market as much, you probably don't have to spend as much. But like those rule of thumbs, like you should spend 3 to 5% or you should spend 10. There's not a one size fit all. It's not a cookie cutter model. And again, while I spend 15,000 a month, and while I do recommend for most startups, you probably want to spend at least 5,000 a month. I would never sit out here and tell somebody this is what you have to spend on marketing to be successful. So it's not a one size fit all from either way. When you look at this from a scarcity mindset, you're trying to get the biggest piece of a smaller pie possible. So, is my overhead in the 30%? No, it's not. But for across my different offices as a conglomerate, is my overhead right around 50% most months? Yes, it is. And my EBITDA margin is typically in the low to mid 20s, 23 to 25% usually. I would rather have 50% overhead and 23% EBITDA on a $15 million group than to have 38% overhead and 34% EBITDA of a $1 million practice. So, I'm okay getting a little smaller piece of the pie if my pie is a whole hell of a lot bigger. And that's really what that abundance mindset is. So,
Well, part of it is like, I think we get into this mode of like, it's really hard. It's like, there's kind of like an arc of spending money on your practice. And it's like in the beginning, you get in this like heavy spend mode of buying the stuff, almost playing house with your practice and building it. And you start getting some revenue coming in and you start looking at that revenue and going, well, if I cut this and I cut that and I cut this and I cut that, I can take home $6,000 more a month. Right. But what if you spent $8,000 more and 6 months from now you woke up and you're taking home $20,000 more a month? You know what I mean? Like, then there's a balance. Listen, now if you're having some cleaning service come to your practice twice a week and it's costing you $600 a month and you have extra staff and you don't need to pay for that cleaning service, then you have extra staff clean, you cut the cleaning service, right?
oh, I agree. And I'll tell you what, guys, for as abundance minded as I am, I don't want anyone out there to think that I spend money to spend money or I waste money. I still analyze every single dollar we spend in our group. I mean, for instance, we're looking at adding some testing for both new hires as well as we're going to do some testing for our current employees, and especially for those in more leadership roles, we're going to add some aptitude testing. And I had gotten a recommendation for the Wonderlic test, and I said, oh, that's great. That's what the QBs take in the NFL, and that sounds cool. We'll definitely look into that. And so I had our CFO had called and spoken to them about adding this testing to our group, and I guess they used to do a price per test model. It was like $35 a test. I was like, oh yeah, that's great. We'll definitely do that. I guess they've gone away from that price per test model, and now they're on a annual subscription only model, and their annual subscription starts at about $10,000. And I said, that's ridiculous. Like, I don't, and they tell you, oh, you get 500 tests a year or whatever it was, 700 tests a year or whatever it is. I don't need that. Even with the group even with my group the size it is. I mean, we're soon going to have about 75 employees as these new practices come on here in the next couple of months, but 75 employees, maybe we hire a couple leadership positions in a year. I don't need 700 tests. Even for the current employees, we're not testing all of our employees on the Wonderlic on aptitude. We're only testing the leadership positions. I told them, I said, hey, I really only need maybe 30 tests in a year. Can we do a pay per test model, or do you have like a lower subscription? And they were, they basically said, no, we don't. Essentially, I think they've decided that they don't no longer want to cater to smaller businesses. They want to cater to, larger organizations, and it's just not worth their time to mess with this pay per test model. And that's fine. It's totally fine. But at the end of the day, as much as I want to invest in our leadership team, I said, there's got to be other good aptitude tests out there that we can pay per test, because while I could afford to spend $10,000 on this subscription for this annual aptitude testing, it doesn't make sense. I don't see the ROI there to spend this 10. So we found another aptitude test that I think it's called employee testing or something like that, probably a generic brand for Wonderlic. But I'll tell you what, I bet it's going to do just as well or very similar. And we're paying, I think, $34 per test now or something like that. So instead of spending $10,000 on this aptitude testing, I'm going to spend maybe $750. I just saved over $9,000 on that. So again, guys, abundance mindset does not equal wasting money. I do not go out of my way to try to waste money in the group. I do try to keep our overhead in check. I do try to keep our offices profitable. but I am willing to invest in things that make sense and that will turn ROI. And that includes marketing. That includes good marketing. Now, I do want to touch on another point he made, which was, hey, you're just lining the pockets of your marketing company. So I guess there are probably marketing companies out there that charge a percentage of your total ad spend. That's not something I'd recommend. That's not something that Energize does with me. I had before Energize, I had looked at a couple other companies and none of them did that. So I'm sure there are companies that charge a percent of your marketing spend. I would recommend avoiding that because at the end of the day, if they're managing your marketing, there's not that much increased cost to the marketing company if you're more aggressive with marketing or less aggressive. So if they are charging a percentage and the more you spend on marketing, the more you're paying your marketing company, that's probably not a good model for you. And so I would agree with D'Angelo there. I would say, hey, like if that's the marketing, if that's what your marketing company is doing, I would avoid that. I would say, go to a flat rate model type of a thing. But that's why it makes sense if you're spending a flat rate. Hey, this is what we charge for managing your Google ads, or this is what we charge for managing Meta and Google, or whatever it is. You're charging a flat rate. The more you invest in marketing, the lower percentage that marketing service fee becomes. So it's actually the opposite. Because I invest more in marketing, I'm spending a lower percentage on my marketing services than I would if you're paying, 2,000, let's say you're paying $2,000 a month in marketing service fees and you're only spending $1,000 a month in ad spend, you're spending more in the marketing service fees than you're spending on your ad spend. So in that sense, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's interesting because we don't believe in taking a percentage of the ad spend. We think it's a really bad idea for everybody involved. Because the other problem is too is like, let's say your client's on a limited budget. You're gonna take 12% of the limited budget, and you're gonna take 12% of the ability for them to have return on investment. Like if you take a percentage of the ad budget, you're telling your client that I want to take a percentage of your possibility of growth. Like you're taking the fuel from the machine, right? Like you're like eroding the possibility of the upside they're looking for. So it's like, why do you why would you ever take a percentage of ad spend? And we don't do that really on any product. The only scenario I think would happen is if you went to like if it was a single practice went to like a super high amount on Google AdWords. When the amounts get big, you're doing lots and lots of campaigns. Google AdWords can get a little more labor intensive, but not. It's a very unique scenario where that might actually make sense for the marketer, where they might need to, but it's not blanket across the board. It's not every practice, but like you generally shouldn't do it. Like we don't ever take a percentage of ad spend. So is Dr. Vallo dumb? I think the real answer to guys to this is I think everyone has a valid point of view. So I think that, you know, you have to look at things very much through a unique lens and ask yourself a lot of questions. I think it's very okay to question the subject matter experts. And when someone says something like, does it really apply to me? Like, what was his scenario? Like, what was his conditions? Being a dentist in the United States, your conditions and geography and your modalities of treatment, there's so many things that affect how successful you are. The other thing, we're going to move on to our next episode here in a minute. The other thing is don't look at your peers and what they're doing, and also don't believe everything they're saying. There's a lot of hype out there. I have docs all the time that come to me and say, I do 200,000 a month, and it's 180 in production and 120 in collections. So
I agree with you, Matt, and I think it's good to challenge the thought leaders out there. And I'll tell you what, at the end of the day, guys, like don't blindly listen to everything I say because everything I do is probably not going to work the same way for you in your practice. If you just took at base level, hey, Dr. Vallo spends $15,000 a month on marketing. If I spend $15,000 a month on marketing, my practice is going to be super successful. But like if you don't do the same type of marketing I'm doing, if you're not using the same marketing company I'm using, if your phones aren't on point, you're not using a good call center to field all those new patient calls, your phone's not being answered, you don't have good confirmation systems in your office, you don't have a good office experience, you don't have a good treatment coordinator closing treatment, either you or your associate docs aren't diagnosed. I mean, there are so many freaking factors that come into play with this that if you don't do all these different things the same way that I do them, you're not going to get the same results that I'm getting simply by spending more money on marketing. So I don't think you should take what anyone says at face value. I think you need to understand that everyone's situations are different. But from a general standpoint, if you invest more in marketing and you've got your systems pretty much in check, you should see a return on that investment and your practice should grow because of that. So that's basically it, guys. At the end of the day, anyone is welcome to challenge anything I say on Facebook. And I'll tell you what, on the same post, before that whole interaction had happened, my initial comment had just basically said how much I spend, didn't go into a lot of details. And someone said, "Oh, wow, that's a lot of ad budget. How many new patients are you expecting from 100 or from $15,000 a month?" And that was a great question. And so I told him, I said, "Hey, my goal when I spend 15,000 typically is 125 to 175 new patients a month. That means that my marketing is working the way that I want it to work." So, again, great to ask questions, great to challenge points, but just come at it respectfully and don't act like you have all the answers. Because I'll tell you what, guys, what I've done, what I've accomplished growing this group, I don't have all the answers. I learn new things every single day. I love being in dental mastermind groups. Every single time I go to one of these events and I'm around the, other successful dentists, I learn new things that I'm like, I think I've been doing that wrong. I think I could do this better. So you should have an open mind. Just don't come at it from the perspective of I have all the answers. My way is the only right way of doing things. If you don't do things my way, you're wrong. You're an idiot. You're getting taken advantage of. Because I'll tell you what, guys, I'm not afraid to clap back, and I look forward to more episodes like this because I'll tell you what, it's kind of fun. It's fun having these spicier debates and topics and all that stuff. And I will say, one last point. This is no hard feelings. I don't have any hard feelings against D'Angelo for saying that, what he said. I wanted to kind of bring to light, those conversations that are out there and just, bring to light the fact that there are different ways to do things. You can run a mean and lean profitable practice. And if that's your goal, that's totally fine. But at the same time, there's other ways to do things and you can have an abundance mindset and you can invest a lot more in marketing and you can grow a bigger group practice. And you've got to take into consideration what your goals are, what your vision is, what your demographics are, and all that stuff. There's no one right answer to the question of how should you market or how much should you spend on marketing.
Dr. D'Angelo's defense, or D'Angelo Webster, I think his name was. I don't know, Doc. You know, there's just like there's a reason why there's multiple subject matter experts in the industry, multiple consultants, multiple coaches. Like there's Ideal is the best startup consulting firm ever, and then there's Kelly Schwartz is great if you're having hygiene recall and efficiency problems and process problems, and you want an on-site guy to come fix him. And Kelly Schwartz is the best, right? And they're different. They're both very good, but they're different. And like if I was a rural doc that wanted to have a certain low margin of overhead and have a comfortable practice that didn't stress me out, and I wanted a certain dental lifestyle living in a rural area, Dr. Webster is probably definitely the guy to call to achieve that. And there are plenty of docs that want that. I have a doc, I'll never forget him, great guy, Ideal alumni, Eric Nelson. And Eric was in Southern Utah. And Eric knew what he wanted from the beginning. One of my favorite docs I ever worked with, knew that I want this kind of practice, and he just focused on what he wanted. He got the right advice and the right people, and between me and him, and he was an Ideal mastery, he got to his goal. And then he said, "I'm hitting the numbers I want to hit. I don't need to grow anymore." And he set his life on. And Eric, listen, and you and Eric are no less successful, more successful than each other. Eric knew what he wanted, he hit the target, and he achieved. Andrew knew he wanted, he hit the target, and he achieved. It's just, what is your target, right? And if a doc called me and said, "Hey, I want to open up a rural practice and do $1 million-ish a year and not be stressed out and have low overhead," yeah, Dr. Webster's probably the subject matter expert. If you're like, "Hey, I want to grow 10 practices in 5 years, make sure they're all profitable, and make sure everyone opens up month one with mature practice numbers," you should probably call Dr. Vallo, right? I think it's just, it's perspective is what you want, what lens you look through.
I'm going to piggyback on that real quick and we're going to wrap this episode up. So, basically, guys, what Matt is saying is before you listen to the advice of another dentist, a consultant, whatever, make sure that what they've accomplished or what they're trying to accomplish aligns with what your goals are. So, there are a lot of experts out there, that have done different things, have different types of practices, small single doc offices, larger groups, larger group practices. Just make sure that the advice you're taking is aligning with the goals that you want to achieve. So if you want something like what I have, if you want to have a larger group practice, multi-practice locations, you want associate-driven practices, you've got to have that abundance mindset. You've got to be more aggressive with marketing. You've got to be willing to take risks. You've got to do things a certain way. But like, if you don't want that, that's totally fine. If you want to be the only doc in your practice and you just want to have a nice, profitable, lean and mean practice where you're not wasting any money, there are other ways to do things. And I would not follow my advice to do that, because it's not gonna, you're not gonna end up in the same spot. So you've got to be intentional. You've got to plan out your goals. You got to think, what do I want my practice to be like 5 years from now? And you've got to reverse engineer it, and you've got to go find people that have already done it. And those are the people you should be taking advice from. So that's it. Again, a little spicy episode, but hopefully it was an enjoyable, eye-opening topic for you guys. We'll get back into some more actual actionable type of episodes here next. So,
all right, guys, thank you so much for joining. Please hit like, subscribe, and follow. Please share this as much as you can. We do not take sponsors. Me and Andrew make no money off of this. We do this just for the benefit of you guys. All right, guys? So thank you guys, and have a great day.